Okay, so today I'm going to walk you through my classroom management plan. So here on the first page I have my personal philosophy, and as you can see there's several different aspects that all go into classroom management. So things like classroom layout, relationships, teacher expectations, even lesson plans can all contribute to your classroom management plan. So it's important to consider how each of those things are going to work in your classroom. So for example, for me personally, relationships are really important, and I want to create a classroom with a safe and loving learning environment. So I want to have students who trust me, and I want to be able to really get to know my students and have them trust not only me but also each other, and feel like they have a voice in the classroom. I feel like that's really important. I also want to have high expectations of them, and have a classroom layout and environment where they feel welcomed and like they can collaborate with their classmates. I really identify with the Richard Kerwin's theory of discipline with dignity, and I think that that's really important because I love that he sees discipline as a learning process, because for me that means that discipline goes beyond just punishment and kind of fixing behaviors, but it also goes beyond that to really teaching students to be good people and teaching them to be productive members in society. I also really like Rudolf Streicher's logical consequences theory. I think that that's important because it's kind of going along with the discipline as a learning process. It's so important that students can see how every action, good or bad, will have a consequence, because that's how life works. And so it's important that in your classroom I can have consequences prepared that match the behaviors. So for example, if someone doesn't clean up, it's still important that they the logical consequence would be that they still are responsible to go back and clean up. So that may mean that they miss out on something else later because they need to go do what they didn't do before. So here on the next page I talk about prevention, and as you can see there's lots of different aspects that play into prevention, including attention signals, transition, rules and procedures, and of course the first day. First days are really important because that's when you should start teaching your rules and procedures so that you can start to establish a smooth running system from the very beginning. Something that I think is really important are attention signals. I think they can also be kind of a fun thing in your classroom. They're something that students can definitely have a say in, or you can teach them some kind of fun ones that you can change up once in a while. I personally like the hands on top and then they respond everybody stop, or like holy moly and then they respond guacamole. I think the call and response ones are kind of fun, but I do also think that it's important to have a nonverbal attention signal ready that you can teach your class, so that in situations like in the hall or in an assembly or something like that, that you can still get their attention quickly and efficiently. And then rules and procedures are also a huge part of prevention, because if your rules and procedures are set up clearly, then you won't have as much need to intervene. I just really love that prevention is the most valuable source of help or tool in classroom management, because it can really make or break your whole system. So on the next page I talk a little bit about intervention. And intervention, there's kind of three important parts, so or like responses. So situational is, I like to think of it as kind of how you set up your classroom. So you're making sure that you're removing distractions, you're planning lessons in a way that they can be altered if you feel like students aren't engaged. You're trying to boost your interest in or students' interest in the lesson, and just doing those things. And then mild response to intervention is going to be that you're going to use things like the nonverbal responses. So you could use the teacher look, or just get close to them, kind of touch them so they know, hey, like, don't do that. But it kind of just helps to re-engage them. And of course those can also be verbal, like you can ask, hey, what should you be doing? Because if you've set up your procedures and rules clearly and your expectations of them, then they should know what they need to be doing. And then of course moderate is even a step further than that, so that could include things like contacting parents or seeing the principal, having a timeout, or even changing their seat, just things that are going to help them to really modify their behavior and be re-engaged in learning. And then of course I also included in my pocket the notes that we took in class. And one of the things that I really liked from that is just that we talked about learning to be a noticer, because I think intervention is just being aware of the behavior that's going on in your classroom and then having a plan in place to address that. So on the next page, I talk about, here in the middle is the democratic classroom. So one of the things that I really love about the democratic classroom is taking the time to do morning meetings. A big part of democratic classroom is making sure that students have a voice and opportunities to lead, and I think that morning meetings are a great way to do both of those things. It allows students to share things about themselves and also to have the opportunity to take on different roles in leading the meeting and in hearing from other students in the classroom. And another thing that I really want to implement in my own future classroom is having student jobs. I think that that teaches students to really value the community that we're building in the classroom, and also to recognize that everyone has a role and a part to play, and that as we work as a team, then we can accomplish a lot more. And so here I have I also printed out the different articles that we read for the online learning that we did for class, because I really liked a lot of the ideas in there and hope to implement those in my future classroom. And then here on this page, I talk about motivation. And so motivation is really important in the classroom. Of course, there's different types of motivation, and I think the one that we strive for most in the classroom is working towards intrinsic motivation, which is just acting out of doing something because you enjoy it. And of course, in motivating our students to learn, that's the kind of motivation that we want them to have. And so there's different ways to motivate students. It's important to make sure that things are relevant and interesting to them, so you can get their input into rewards or things that they would find motivating. So one thing that I want to be sure to do in my future classroom is to make sure that I'm rewarding students on individual, group, and at whole class level. So you can give points. I love what Sister Shumway said about points being cheap, so you can just give as many as you want because they don't cost you money, but they can still be highly motivating. And I really like the idea of teaching our students why we have certain expectations or why we're doing certain activities, because I think that that can lead to motivation as well, because when they understand why they're doing something, they're going to find more satisfaction in their work, and they're going to be more motivated in that way. And then here on the back, I have my classroom layout plan and then some different theme ideas. And so a big thing with my classroom layout is just that I want things to flow as far as transitions. So I want to make sure that I have places for learning centers, having the more noisy ones away from the quieter ones, and then also just making sure that there's plenty of space to move around between the students, and also that they can easily transition from one activity to the next. I think that's a really important aspect of the classroom layout that can help to prevent a lot of behavior problems later on. And then of course, the decorations and theme ideas are just really important, that you set up a classroom that's welcoming and a place where students feel comfortable and excited to be and to learn. And so one idea that I really liked is kind of a hot air balloon theme, or like a sky theme. I just really like the idea of the sky being the limit, or being, carried away, or like learning is an adventure. I just think there's a lot of places that you could go with that, and it just feels safe and comfortable but exciting at the same time, so I really like that. And then in my pocket here I have a little page on rules and procedures, which, like I was talking about in the beginning with prevention, is so important. So I just have one kind of non-negotiable rule, I guess, and that's respect, because I think that's huge in the classroom. If you can teach students to be respectful, then they're going to have that life skill, and they're going to be so much more prepared to be a productive member of society. And of course, it's so important that you have your procedures set up, because procedures can be anything from sharpening your pencil to going to the bathroom to lining up. And so everything that you do in the classroom can be a procedure, and it needs to be taught, and you need to have expectations for how you want it to be done. And so as you can see, there's a lot of things that contribute to a classroom management plan, but here I have mine well on its way to being in place, and so I'm excited to implement these things in my future classroom. Thanks.